Hi everybody, this is the week 2 wrap-up. I have a very important message at the end of this presentation regarding the term project, so please stay tuned for that. I want to go over this material fairly quickly. It should only take about 10 minutes. Some of the material I cover was covered in my overview lecture, but I want to reiterate some of it here, so let me get right into that. So first of all, some general comments on the discussion posts. Most of the discussions were posted on time, though some weren't. The importance of being on time is that when a person submits their discussion post late, it's due on Wednesday, for example, and if they post it on Friday, that means that no one really has a chance to read and comment on it. Ideally, I'd like every student to read every other student's discussion posts and comment on those that they find particularly interesting. Most were thoughtful and well written, but again, it's very clear when one is written in haste. Most of your responses back to your peers were thoughtful. Again, here, it's also becomes fairly clear when someone doesn't devote too much time to that part of the assignment. Some typical problem areas that I saw, format and spelling were problems in some posts, and not fully answering the questions were comments in some posts. You know, the beauty of an online class as opposed to a live class is that this is our discussion, but in this discussion you get to actually take your time and create a coherent, well thought out response. Sometimes in the live classroom environment, that doesn't happen. Things like emotion might get in the way. But in the online environment, you have a chance to actually craft a very reasonable, coherent discussion point. And you have a chance to proofread what you're saying before you submit it. So please take the time to do that. And then problem areas of not understanding the material and also some difficulty with what was meant by mandates. So I'm going to get into this in just a moment here, but let me just say the way I designed the course is that everything I give you as source material is meant to work together. So I assign readings from Bryson, for example. I assign web pages of government or nonprofit organizations. This week it happened to be the One World Community Health Center. And I provide an overview lecture. All of those things are meant to work together. None of those things are meant to stand in isolation. So unless you actually look at all of those things, you do the readings, you listen to the overview lecture, you're actually looking at the website I assign, there are going to be things that you will miss, and that will show in your answers. So please do use all the material at your disposal. So what did Bryson mean by mandates? This is from the overview lecture, and it's from Bryson on page 49 and 50. He says formal and informal mandates are the various musts an organization must do. So what are musts? They are requirements, restrictions, expectations, pressures, and constraints. Those are both formal and informal. So what are formal mandates? Formal mandates are relevant legislation, policies, ordinances, charters, articles, and contracts that outline the organization's formal mandates. That means those things are written somewhere. What are informal mandates? He says informal mandates are typically political in the broadest sense. Okay, so right here, what I want you to understand is that a mandate may be formal or informal, but they are must-dos for the organizations. They don't quit doing informal mandates just because they're informal, because those expectations have been levied upon the organization from some source. So I asked a lot of you in your discussions, when you said these are mandates, these are the formal mandates, these are the informal mandates, I asked you to come back to me and say where they came from. Where did this formal mandate come from, and where did this informal mandate come from? And we're going to talk about that just a little bit here. This is also from the overview lecture, but I reiterate it here. So let's parse the words. Requirements means there's probably a law or regulation assigning some task to the organization. Restrictions, those are probably, they could be formal impositions on an organization. They might be informal too, but typically it might be a law or ordinance telling an organization what it cannot do. Expectations. When an organization is expected to do something, whose expectations are we talking about? And is that formal or informal? Possibly it's informal. If some client base or donor or someone else expects something of the organization. Pressures. So who puts pressure on an organization? Insiders or outsiders or both? And then constraints. We talked a little bit about how, for example, the budget might be a constraint on an organization. And is that formal or informal? And finally, this question of why organization members don't know their mandates. So again, these are all must-dos for an organization. So, in our exercise, where did the mandates come from for One World? Now, I also asked you to look at not just the One World web page, but I asked you to look at this organization called the Health Resources and Services Administration. HRSA is part of the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, and it turns out that this organization has a lot of the requirements that organizations like One World must comply with. Now, if you looked at the One World website under their mission, you saw that One World Health is a federally qualified health center, an FQHC, and must meet certain requirements. So I just went to their mission statement page, and here's what I found. I found that it must serve a federally designated underserved area or population. That's in their mission statement. That it must operate under a majority consumer board of directors governance structure. That means it has a board of directors, but a certain percentage of the board of directors has to be consumers of the services. That it must provide comprehensive primary health care, dental care, mental health, and substance abuse services, and that it must provide services to all persons according to their ability to pay. And so all these statements I found on their website there at One World under the mission statement. Now, as it turns out, I looked at the HRSA website, which I just talked about, and it's here. And it turns out these are mandates for the kinds of federally qualified health centers, of which One World is one. So you had to dig a little bit in the web pages to find these things. Okay, so what about informal mandates? Right here, you'd find this on the mission statement page. One World Health Center says that in partnership with the community, One World provides culturally respectful, quality health care with special attention to the underserved. So let's key on this word, culturally respectful healthcare. So down the page a little bit, I found this word in Spanish, ubicaciones. I don't speak Spanish very well, but what that word means is locations. So sure enough, I clicked on this, and I found a page in Spanish that describes where all the locations are. So what would that tell you about an informal mandate? What that would tell me is that at least some of the providers have to speak Spanish. So I said that at least one informal mandate of One World is that it must be able to communicate with patients in at least English and Spanish. So sure enough, on their webpage, I found a link to careers. In other words, they are hiring people. And here is an excerpt from a job opening for a dental assistant. So this first paragraph is, this is might be things that you'd find in a typical job application for a dental assistant. But we see that the dental assistant must be passionate about caring for underserved populations. So this underserved population came from their formal mandates, didn't it? The selected candidate will assist the dentist with procedures chairside, collect data, and maintain accurate documentation for patients' files, sterilize dental surfaces, instruments, and equipment. Okay, that's kind of what you expect a dental assistant to do. But then down here it says more about the ideal candidate. And right here it says proficiency in both English and Spanish is required. It's required, but it's an informal mandate. But so what this says is that, you know, One World is probably not required by law to be bilingual, but they have required themselves to be bilingual. Further, this informal mandate of being bilingual comes from probably their client base, which predominantly speaks Spanish and English, but many of their patients speak only Spanish. A lot of them speak Spanish and English, but many of them speak only Spanish. So that's how I derived these formal and informal mandates, just looking at the website. The two websites I gave you, the One World and the Health Resources and Services Administration websites. I found all these mandates. Okay, so this was week 1 of me having you look at a website. We're coming into week 3 now, and what you're going to find is every week from here on out in the course, I'm going to have you use websites of government or nonprofit organizations. So I have two purposes here. One is for you to be able to work on the material from strategic planning that I want you to work on. The second is for you to understand things about that organization. In other words, I want you to learn about an organization through its online presence. So I got the feeling this week that not everybody looked at the full website. So now you're kind of seeing what I'm expecting, and you can do a more thorough job. So when we're trying to learn about an organization through its online presence, what should we look for? Okay, for one thing, you're going to have to do more than look at just the landing page. You know, the landing page is when you type in www.unomaha.edu. You're going to get UNO's landing page. But if you want to know more about UNO, if you want to know about course requirements, you're going to have to dig a little deeper. And you're going to have to find out what you're looking for. And as you dig deeper, here's the kinds of things you should be looking at. If you look at an organization, what is the mission of that organization? What messages are the organization trying to convey to the public? What messages are being conveyed to taxpayers, potential donors, clients? Is the messaging effective? Is the content usable? So these are the kinds of things I want you to do as we continue through the semester. This week, we're going to be using Metro Omaha, which is the transit company in Omaha, and I'm going to be asking you to come up with a list of stakeholders. So to do that, you're going to have to dig into their website more than just the landing page. Okay, so I promised that I had an announcement on the term project, and that is this. The term project proposal was due on September 10th, which is the end of week 3. However, I have pushed that back to September 17th, so I'm extending the due date by 1 week. I've heard from a couple of students on term projects, but not very many. So what I'd like you to do really is use that extension time to figure out what you're thinking about with your term project. If you have questions, please do email me, and I will gladly discuss those with you over email. So thanks a lot. I'm looking forward to the discussions this week. Thank you.